Okay, good morning, everybody. It's almost the half of the last day. I can imagine you're a little bit tired now, right? Are you okay still? Yeah, well, yeah. I got a whole lot of code in my slide, so I'm sorry if I gonna fry your brains or something, but at the end there's a link to all the slides. So if you're sober again, if you're feeling healthy again, if you're up for it again, you can still revisit those slides afterwards as well. Who doesn't like cats, by the way? I'm sorry. There are a lot of cats in here. I want to start with introducing some of them and also to make a reference to us as people. This is our late lovely cat called Oscar. He had one eye, had multiple problems as well, but we treated him well and he had a great life and he dealt with his missing eye. No problem. Other examples are, for instance, this is Dimka. She suffered frostbite in Russia, for instance. Maybe you know Grumpy Cat. She isn't with us anymore, unfortunately, but she had feline dwarfism, and also Little Bob, also not with us anymore. Monty, who's missing a nasal bridge. Scooter, who's partially paralyzed. Mercury, aka T-Rex, who's missing 2 front legs. Probably they were cut off with a weed whacker when she was lying in the grass when she was a little kitten. And finally, for instance, we have Pico, who suffers from glaucoma. Well, you might be wondering, why are you showing these cat pictures? Well, because I can, but also because cats, in this case, have the same disabilities, disadvantages as humans can have. So I hope you can relate with the cats, so you can relate with the humans as well. And if you don't like cats, well, relate to the humans then, please. Hi. My name's Rowdy. I'm a cat dad of 5 myself. It's a lovely hairy bunch on the couch here. And in my day-to-day life, I'm a front-end focused senior DevOps engineer with a special attention for accessibility. I try to add another word to my title every week, because why not? Maybe full stack somewhere, or I don't know. Let's talk about accessibility. Accessibility on its own, the word is very hard, because those 11 characters in between, it's hard to type them, so you usually see things around like ALI, A11Y. That's a numeronym, just like we have for internationalization, because that's hard to write as well. Or in the US, you have K9 for dogs, K9. So don't be scared if you see this coming along. Let's look at some examples of accessibility in the real world. If you're blind, you probably need to rely on Braille for sometimes. Well, if you have these examples, like the one with the 309 on it, that number of the room is on a, say, embossed background. So good luck with your finger on there, finding what's actually there. And the other examples in Siri, thank you. On the other side, you see, for instance, I think it's probably from a public toilet or something. It has Braille on it, but it's flat. It's just printed on there. So good luck with feeling that. Other ones, you probably have seen the ones on the left-hand side where they help you move around the city, but yeah, well, there are cars, or there's a pole here, just go around it, or we don't just don't care. And the other one is probably in a metro or a bus or something. You see the alarm button and the stop button, but do you see the dots on it? They're exactly the same. So yeah, if there's an alarm, you probably want to stop, but if you want to stop at the next exit, the next place the bus will stop, you don't want to press alarm probably. And how about this for excitement? If you look at the toilet, well, good luck getting that toilet paper if you're sitting on that stool. Or if you're adventurous, go with your wheelchair. It says it's wheelchair accessible. Try to go, well, up is very hard probably, but going down is very fast. So these are examples really in the true world that we messed things up. We tried and we said, well, we are accessible, right? Well, not always. And maybe this for a last one. You can see at say the house, there's a stairs on the left-hand side. So if you can walk, it's easy to come there. But if you're on a wheelchair, well, I'll see you in an hour probably, because you have to go all the way. And there, it's relatively in an angle as well. So probably if you're coming on top, and it's like, I need to rest for half an hour because you just keep on wheeling up. Yeah, and the last one, it's very nice. I don't know why the door is so high actually, but they have a nice elevator there. But yeah, try to get on the elevator. All right, we do that kind of stuff as well on the web. And today I want to show you some practical examples to not make those mistakes and help people really access the web. We have the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. There are a lot of documents there and a lot of information on how you should make sure that your website is accessible. I'm not going to go through it all because that's, I don't know, we're probably here at 6 o'clock still. But let's talk about the 4 principles that are in there. Things need to be perceivable. Well, it makes sense, right? People need to be able to find the content on your website. That's why they're there. Your website needs to be operable. Also, need to be able to use it with any kind of device. It needs to be understandable, right? If you're writing stuff on your website and nobody has a clue what's it about, why do you have a website? And it also needs to be robust. That means it needs to work with different technologies, different tools, but also keep in mind what's coming on in the future. And we don't know what's in the future, but we can take that in account as well. So the Web Accessibility Guidelines have 4 principles. Those 4 principles have among them 13 guidelines, and those 13 guidelines have 78 success criteria. There are 2 links there. The lower one is more easy to read because it gives more practical examples if you want to know more about it. Let's look at the first one, robust. So it needs to work anywhere. Needless to say that it needs to work in all browsers. I don't want to see websites anymore like I did in the late 90s saying works best in Internet Explorer 4. And a screen from 800 by 600, for instance. But it's not only browsers. It could be on your TV, it could be on your watch, in your car, or maybe any other device that's coming out. I've seen refrigerators with screens. I'm not sure if you want to watch a website on that, but you never know. But it's not like only for, say, us, the people that have sight that can see stuff. It also needs to work for people that can only listen to websites. So we have a few packages. For instance, on macOS we have VoiceOver, also on iOS, that's built in for screen readers, for people that want to use screen readers. And on Windows you practically have 2 choices. That's either NVDA, that works best with Firefox, that's free, or JAWS, that works best with Chrome, that has a subscription. But I was mentioning it should not only work in a browser, also with other technologies. Now I know the picture is a little bit small if you're on the back, but let me explain a little bit. For instance, you have a sip and puff mechanism, that somebody is in a wheelchair and the only means of using your website is by either sucking or blowing on a little tube. Or they have a tube in their mouth and they can point on the screen, or maybe a head pointer that you use by bowing your head on the keyboard. Another version of the mouse stick as well, but people also use screen magnifiers. I'm over 50 now and I see my eyes are getting worse and worse, so I usually just increase the size of the screen as well. And if you're not equipped for that, if your website's not equipped for that, then it's really annoying. And the last one, that's really respect for that one. That's using eye tracking. He doesn't have, well, he has part of his limbs, but the only way he can operate with either a computer or something else is by using eye tracking. So that means you have to look at the tools you're using to build that website. Does anybody still remember these? Let me go with the first one, Java applets. In the late 90s, we incorporated Java in websites. Not anymore, luckily. The next one is Real Player, used for playing audio and video most of the time. Or Adobe Air, trying to create interactive websites. Well, we have other tools for that right now. Microsoft Silverline, similar to Adobe Air. And Flash, Micromedia Flash, that's been killed by the iPhone actually way back. And that gave you means to do something interactive, but it's not there anymore. So what kind of technology should you rely on? The one that's been around since the start of the web. HTML, and especially semantic HTML, please. I will explain a little bit about it, but I want to remember that if there are any React, Vue, or Angular developers here, I'm a Vue developer myself, please know there are more HTML elements than a div. Keep that in mind. It's not the only one. I think you do, and I think you think it is, but it isn't. And let me explain you why. For instance, we have the headings, and the headings go from H1 to H6 to imply what it's about. Usually use H1 for the most important part on your website. And if you use it like this, then a screen reader user can navigate through this. On the right-hand side, you see a little pane, and that's on macOS, for instance, that's called the rotor. And a screen reader user can move between different parts. So in this case, he can browse your website, or browse your web page actually, through the levels of headings. So if you have multiple headings too, they will be shown up here as well. So it's really important to have that, use those headings in a correct way. So that means please don't use level heading 1 more than once on your page. Also try not to skip levels, because that's really frustrating and weird. And the reason that happens quite often is that, well, the designer says it's 20 pixels, so an H3 is 20 pixels, so I need to use an H3. No. Please use the appropriate heading and just use CSS. Because CSS is there to style, and HTML is for the structure. Also, I talked about a rotor for people to navigate. Is also using sectioning elements like the headers or main or footer and the nav, the navigation. If you do that, you can see in the landmarks rotor that people can go through it. Well, the header is called a banner. I don't know why, but that's how they reflected it. A site is complementary. Usually use a site for something extra, not the main part of your website. And footer is content information. But you can see a problem here. I have 3 navigations. What navigation are we talking about? So you can use area labels, and I'm coming back to that in a bit, to give more meaning to that element. So for instance, now we have a navigation with the area label main, and it then will put in the landmarks main navigation. Also will pronounce main navigation. You don't need to say area label main space navigation, because then you get main navigation. That's a little bit too much. But you can see with the breadcrumbs and the secondary as well. It gives more meaning about that part of the website. And I love this one, because we developers think that a button is not a button. We need to create it ourselves. We need to have a div, because The diff is almighty. So let's create a button like everybody does in their own, in their own systems. But the thing is, you need to do a lot. First of all, if you can see, I have a label and input just for the field, but it's the diff with the class of btn, button to style it, and it says submit. Well, what do I need to do then? Well, it needs to listen to a click event, right? If you click that diff, then it should act like a button. So if I click it, I add an event listener here to listen to that click. And when I click it, well, it needs to submit the form, right? So I write another method to submit the form if you hit that button. But you also needs to be focusable. You need to be able to go on your keyboard with your tab key and get there to actually hit that button. So we need to add a tab index of 0. That makes it focusable with a keyboard. But it also needs to be accessible in a way that screen readers know that it is a button. So this diff that's not a button, we give it a role of button that makes it a button. But the thing is, it also needs to listen if you hit the enter or the space bar on that button, that so-called button. So you need to write more code to again listen to the key down and see whether it's one of those and then submit the form. Well, that's a lot of work. That could have just been this. Just use a button. Okay, you have a class button to style it, but in this case, it's the only button in the form. That means it's already a submit button, so it will submit your form. So please stick to the HTML first and then try to see if you need to create something out of it, but not just throw it away and say, well, I can do better. And also, do you know the difference between a link and a button? It says continue here, but what will happen? I don't know. Keep in mind that if you are using a button like here, like continue, and you go to a different page, just please use a link, an href, because you're moving away from this page to another one. This will also reflect in, as I said, the rotor, because a user can go through all the links on your page. If it's something doing on your page, maybe calculate something or do an API call and you don't move away, then you can use a button. All right, as I mentioned some ARIA labels already, let's have a small look at ARIA. This is a way to extend HTML for screen readers to get the right context of your application or your buttons or your sliders or whatever. But keep in mind that the first rule of ARIA is like in Fight Club. Don't use it. If it's not necessary, if you can do it with plain HTML or maybe CSS, or use some attributes on HTML, don't use anything from ARIA. The second one is, well, don't change the semantics of that HTML element we have. You can see the diff example that became a button. I did it here with a span. Don't do that. Don't say this span is now a button. Just use a button, please. Also, all interactive controls, so a button or a slider or an input field or anything that needs to be able to be, say, touched or clicked, make sure it can have keyboard focus. And that, as I mentioned before, you can do that with tab index 0. You can also use -1. If there is something on your page that can have keyboard focus, but you really don't want it for, I don't know what reason, you can put it on -1, and then you only control it with JavaScript, for instance. Or you can put it at larger than 0. But if you do that, if you have something on the bottom and you say, well, tab index is, I don't know, 2. If somebody's tapping from the top, it will jump right down. So I would say use 0 and -1 and higher than 0, try to avoid that at all costs. Oh, you see it in colors as well. And we have another rule that if things need to be focusable, if they need to be used, like buttons in this case, do not ever use a row of presentation or hide it from a screen reader, because in the first two examples, you have a button that can't be accessed by a screen reader or by a keyboard. And the last one, and I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into that, is give elements an accessible name. If you look at the first one, it says search and then an input. Like, yeah, I don't know. If I come into this input field, like, it probably says something like input. Input of what? My name, whatever, I don't know. So if you do it like the second one, you're adding an area label saying, well, search. So if somebody hits that input field, it will say input search or something similar. It depends on the screen reader you're using. Or even better, the way I like it, use a label for the input and hook them together with an ID. So the screen reader knows already, okay, this label belongs to this input and will pronounce it correctly as well. If we're talking about labels, I see it often on websites that have maybe news or a blog that have that first link saying, well, I have a link to read more. Well, imagine yourself being on a website, not able to see what's going around, and you open that rotor with all the links, and it says read more, read more, read more, read more, read more. You can read a lot, but you don't know, you don't have a clue what to read, what you are going to read. So for instance, you can add an area label, read more about famous cats. So area label trumps the value that's in between the link. So read more is omitted, and the screen reader will say, read more about famous cats, and you can also see it in the pop-up rotor. That's better, but what was the first rule of ARIA? Don't use it if you have something better. So in this case, the last one, I'm having the whole link saying read more about famous cats, but maybe that's too long for your website, for your the users who can see it. It's like CSS is awesome effect, like it's going out of the box. What you can do is then, well, keep it read more for the people that can see it, because they probably have the context of the whole article they're looking at. But put that part for screen readers in a separate span and give it a class of, and I call it SR only, screen reader only. We define some CSS that hides it from the user that can see it, but it will be available for screen readers. And there are many implementations of it. This is the one that's used mostly. It's of years of practice, putting things that height of 1 pixel, making it absolute, give it a clip rect, I don't know, use it. It makes sure it's not visible, say, for us as sighted people, but for people who rely on screen readers, it's available. Another thing that's really important, if you're building, for instance, single-page applications, and you go to a different page, for instance, the URL might change. That's good, because that will be announced by the screen reader. But if you're doing, I don't know, a calculation and the result comes in that same page, so you don't move away from that page, a screen reader user has no idea that something has changed on your page. It's like, okay, I hit this button and now what? I have no idea. So that's why we have area live that can announce changes. There are two ways. You have polite and assertive. Polite will wait until the screen reader is done with pronouncing what you're reading actually at that point. And assertive will say, I just come straight in and I announce what's going on. Polite is usually more polite to use. I have an example here using assertive. You also, for the first time, you will hear some things about what the screen reader sounds like, so to get you acquainted with that. But when I hit the search button, it will search, and then as soon as it has the results, it will kick in. So let's listen to that.
Voiceover on Safari. Status message. Heading level 1. Refuse to drink water except out of someone's glass. Main. You are currently on a heading level 1. Human. Content selected. Edit text. You are currently on a text field. To enter text in this field, type search button. You are currently on a button. To click this button, press Control, Option, Space.
So I'm now going to hit search, and I'm going to continue reading this page.
Meow whenever a door is opened. Russian search results. 2 items found. 1. Yum, lick human with sandpaper tongue. 2. Wake up human for food at 4 a.m.
Here you could see it just immediately when it had the results, it kicked in and just ignored what was going on there. So be careful with that assertive, but it's a way of making sure that the user knows something has changed. And yes, wake up human for food at 4 a.m. I know that. Fortunately, they are at home and I'm here, so I'm having a good time sleep. Who loves carousels? Oh, there's one brave person there. Good for you. Carousels are horrible. Also, for most of the time, the users only see the first one and it's like, yeah, it's okay. But it's also moving around, and most of the time you don't even have time to read what's going on at that carousel. Like, that was interesting, but now I have to wait 20 more because I can't use manual keys to get back or something. What's going on? But it's even worse for screen reader users. I'm going to leave you with this. So it's going around.
Voiceover on Firefox. ARIA carousel example window. Pause knob has keyboard focus. 2. Item 2. 1. Item 1 for your carousel. 3. Item 3 for your carousel. 1. Item 1 for your carousel. 2. Item 2 for your carousel. 3. Item 3 for your carousel. Your 1. Item 1 for your carousel. 2. Item 2 for your carousel. Your 3. Item 3 for your carousel. 1. Item 1 for your carousel.
Yeah, you get the idea? Sometimes even she managed to say your, and then she was cut off. The thing is, what they're doing, in this case, they're using a list item for that carousel, but it has an area hidden of false or true. And depending on where the slider is, they will change the false or true. What area hidden does, it immediately makes it inaccessible, unavailable for the screen reader. So if you move along to the next one, the screen reader was reading the last one, and then it was gone. So that's why it just keeps on moving and moving. So please don't. Not only for screen reader users, but for us as well, to keep our sanity. In ARIA, we have lots of role states and properties, and also a lot of these attributes. I'm not going to talk about them a lot, but I want to pick out a few that are most common and very useful. For instance, we have a button, not a div. We have a button with an X in it, probably to close a dialogue or something. Well, let's hear how this sounds.
Times button.
A times button. The X is pronounced as times. That's not really useful, right? So in this case, it's good practice to give it an area label called, in this case, called close. This will override the text you just specified, so the times will not be pronounced anymore. It will sound like
close button.
A close button, and that's what we want. We also have area labeled by, and that means you can use something from another place for, in this case, this section. So I'm reusing the H2 here that says famous internet cats. And I'm using this for the section. And the section will pop up in the rotor again, so if you are using the screen reader, you can scroll through it and go from the header to the footer to the navigation, or, for instance, this section.
Landmarks menu. Famous internet cats region.
You can see a landmarks menu, famous internet cats region. So this section is now a region. And if you're interested, you can go into that region and read about all these famous internet cats. A very useful one as well is area described by. And described by is used to add extra information. So if you look at this one, we have an input for a username, and that has some kinds of rules. Normally it would sound like this.
Username, edit text with autofill menu.
Username, edit text with autofill menu. So it means I have an input field for a username. I have no idea what the rules are about this username. If you're a sighted user, you can see, well, it needs to be 6 to 15 characters, and it may contain alphanumeric characters as well. So what you can do very easily is put an area described by on that input and refer to the ID. So in this case, length and format. And then it sounds like this.
Username, edit text with autofill menu. Username must be 6 to 15 characters. Username may contain alphanumeric characters.
And you can hear it also pauses a little bit. So the user knows it's something extra. All right. We have in the browser tools, we have an accessibility tree as well, like you have for the DOM tree. If you mix and mesh this, you might be wondering who wins. Does anybody try to take a guess what's pronounced here? Too scared? Let's hear it.
Heading level 1, H1 with aria labeled B. H1 with aria described B.
Well, what happened is that, first of all, you go to the accessibility tree there in your, this is Chrome DevTools. And here it states the name is H1 with area labeled by. It was pronounced a little bit weird, but it's labeled by. And that is because labeled by will trump area label, which will trump the element that we typed in the H1 here. But also it pronounces H1 with area described by, because that's additional, like we saw before. So try to figure out what's the best solution here. Always the best solution is to have it in your element itself, but if you need to, add those area labels or describe by. Let's move on to the next part, perceivable. The use of color. Oh man. I work for a company and you get an example that has the colors orange and white, and they are so bad. And I'll explain you in a bit. But if you have daltonism, if you are colorblind, as popularly said, and you have either monochrome or the other one I can't pronounce, it's really hard to see what colors they actually are, right? The borders of these inputs. Is it properly or is it bad? So please, for the love of God, add some icons, for instance, there. So if you can't see it well, you can now know what it is. And also, of course, make sure there's for instance, an error beneath it, if there is an error. But color contrast is a big problem on the web. There's a study every year, the Web A Million. They take the million most popular websites and they do all kinds of accessibility checks on it. And low contrast text is about 84%. 84% of the websites have problems with that. If you don't know what contrast ratio is, let me explain it a little bit. It can go from 1 to 21. Usually it's written 1:1 and 21:1. And normal text should have a minimum ratio of 4.5 to 1. And you can see that in your DevTools later. If you have large text or if it's bold text, it can be a little bit less, 3 to 1. And if we're saying large text, that's about 18 points, 24 pixels, and 14 points bold, about 18.5 pixels, say 19 pixels. That's considered good for 3 to 1. And actually, it's a relative easy comparison, a calculation. Until you look at the thing called relative luminance, then it's becoming like this. So I wouldn't advise you to do this yourself. Just use one of the tools that are around there. You have separate tools that you can install on your machine, but also the DevTools have a great one. This one is in Chrome, and it will just say this is the contrast, and it will even say with the green mark that it's okay in this case. Well, as I said, I work for an insurance company in the Netherlands with a lot of orange. So let's get a little bit through this to see what's going on. This orange is still okay, it's 329, but then you get a lighter shade, it's already too low. And if you go to buttons, for instance, we have orange with white, that's also not good. You might think now if you see that that's okay, but it's not actually. And also if you flip it around, it's not okay. And even don't start on gray, like it's less these days, but about 10 years ago, gray on gray was designer's heaven. It's horrible for users with bad eyesight. And also, be careful with text shadows or outlines or on background images. It's really hard to define what's going on there. Orientation is fun to think about. Like, I want to have my website used on a phone like this. And if it's go landscape, no, I don't want that because it messes up my design or something. Well, then you haven't heard about responsive design, I would say. But also if you're, for instance, in a wheelchair and you have an iPad in landscape, and that's the only way you can use it, and a website says, well, hey, please rotate your device to use this website. Yeah, thank you. You can't do that. So please don't do anything that's stated here. Also, this one says, well, you know, if you use it in a portrait, we're going to mess with you and we just rotate the text, so you have to look at like this or rotate your device. So please don't do that. Just let the user use its device like it wants. And if you would have done this, say, well, orientation is landscape, and I'm watching this on a laptop, I have to flip my laptop. That's not easy as well, right? All right. One of the things that's messed up also a lot of times is alternative text for images. A little bit less than the contrast because, I don't know, I don't know because what, but it's still over half of the websites that are missing that. And that's really annoying if you can't see what's on the image. We can see here what's on the image, right? But if I can't see and using the screen reader, I hear this.
MG 9370-1 JPG image.
Yeah, thank you. I always wanted to see that image. No, please use an alternative text. And it's a myth that an alternative text needs to be as short as possible. Saying cat, I don't know. You shouldn't write whole essays, but something like this describes the image.
A red cat lying on the kitchen counter with a brown bag over his head. The bag has holes for the eyes and snout and make the cat look like a bank robber image.
So now if you can't see, you can imagine a little bit how it's how the image will be, right? On the other hand, if you're using an image like this is just a nice background of 4 of my cats. You can use either alternative with an empty string, or you can even leave out the is and the quotes. So just put there alt, and then it's ignored by screen readers. Or what I would suggest, just use some CSS to put that image as a background image. All right, captions. What if you could not hear? We've been doing stuff for people that can't see, but what if you can't hear? You really need to know what's going on in the video, right? So there are let me explain a little bit differences. We have subtitles, so that those are just translations for people that don't speak the language. So my native language is Dutch. If I watch a French or a Norwegian, let's say a Norwegian movie, I have no clue what's it about, so I need translations. But we also have closed captions, and that's not only, say, subtitles, but it's also giving more information of what's going on. I usually have those on as well because I just like seeing, well, there is something, some grim noises or whatever. Not to confuse with open captions, by the way. Those are essentially closed captions, but they are burnt into the video, so everybody needs to watch those. That can be really annoying. You want to have closed captions so you can turn them on and off, depending on what kind of user you are. So let's look at an example. It already starts with suspenseful music. There's no audio, just this. There's some music probably going on. Somebody's walking on the ice. Anybody has an idea what series this is, by the way? I see one person nodding. Yeah, this is Snowpiercer. So Ben has fallen through the ice, and then you can see there's anxious Ben. They're calling him Ben. There's some suspenseful music probably going on. Signal is breaking, so they probably have a bad connection with him. Static crackling. Ben, where are you? And he groans. So even if you can't hear anything, you still have an idea of the suspense that's going on, the agony that he's in. On the other hand, if you can't see but can hear, you might want to have audio descriptions. That's essentially the same thing as closed captions, but the other way around. So I wanted to say, watch this video. No, listen to this video and see if you can get an idea of what's going on. I see people like, no effing clue, right? You're correct. But if we give audio description, then it gets more real for you as well.
Scrat scurries over a large sheet of ice. He spies his acorn under it. He tries to get to it, whacking his nose against the ice. The ice breaks, Scrat falls in, and the acorn bounces out.
And this is the original. Yeah, so keep in mind, if you're creating videos for your product or your customers, make sure that they have closed captions, and ideally also have audio descriptions. Because it's a myth that people that can't hear or can't see don't watch videos or series or movies. All right. Things need to be operable. Let's move on to the next part. We have something called a focus indicator. That's a visual indicator of where your cursor is at that moment, where what is selected is an input field or a button or whatever. And if you don't do anything, the browsers are kind enough to give that to you already. So you can see here, it goes over the links, it goes over this radio group, input field, and then to the button. Now I know designers say, well, it doesn't fit our brand. It's ugly. Get rid of it. Sure, we can. We just say focus outline 0. But let me do this, run this again and see if you can see where the focus is now. Oh yeah, it's there now, because on an input field it will blink, but on the links or, sorry, the buttons, you can't see where it is. Well, good luck if you're using your keyboard. So maybe spice it up a little bit. Make it, maybe this fits your brand or not. I know. So you can do different things with it to make sure that it's still visibly noted that you're somewhere else. So it's okay to do this, but then you also have to do stuff like this. And these are the examples for that I put on the link, for instance, and the button. So make sure that if you remove the outline, do something else to make sure that people know what's going I already said something about the tabbing order with the tab index of 0, but also make it easier for people to skip stuff. If you look at this website, for instance, we have a logo. There's probably a link to the homepage. We have a search input next to it. We have 3 menu items here, but maybe you have 20, I don't know. It's really annoying if you have to go tab, 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 tab. One solution for it is have something to skip to the main content. So if somebody taps on this and hits enter, it goes to the text immediately. And it's so easy to implement because you have a link on top of it that say, for instance, skip to main content, and it just links to an ID that's in this case is ID of main. And if you hit that button, it will scroll there. The CSS behind it, the main thing is that I make sure it's out of the way, out of the screen if it's not there, but if you're tapping and it gets the focus, it will just drop in again. You can do it in many different ways, but this is the one I used for this example, for instance. The other stuff is just making it look kind of pretty. All right, let's move to the part about understandable. One thing I see not used that often is the language attribute. And it's really necessary to use that. And it's missing about 22% on the websites. If you add this, for instance, on the HTML element, you add the language attribute of English in this case, it's good for screen readers because they know, oh, I need to use that kind of language to pronounce this because otherwise you get weird results. But also search engine knows, oh, well, this page is in English. That's good. So I can index that correctly. So it's not doing it just for the, say, people that need accessibility. It's also for better results in search engines. So if you need to sell this, this is the way. And as an example, if you don't use the language attribute, for instance, on this quote from Abbé Pierre, it sounds like this.
Une sourire quand moyen cher que l'électricité, mais d'un autant de lumière.
Well, it sounds like me trying to speak Norwegian and don't know how to pronounce and do stuff. So if you use the language attribute, in this case in French, it sounds way more Frenchy.
Un sourire coûte moins cher que l'électricité, mais donne autant de lumière.
I have no idea what he's saying, but I want to go to dinner with him, definitely. And the other way, for instance, if you have Arabic on your websites, this is a nice quote as well. The road to success is paved with hard work. If you don't use the language attribute here, it sounds horrible as well. But if you use it, it sounds like this.
من طلب العلا سهر الليالي.
It's almost like a song. The benefit of this language attribute that you can also use, because Arabic is right to left, right? Right to left, right? That sounds weird. It's supposed to be from right to left. So in your CSS, I can look for attributes that have the language of Arabic and set the direction from right to left, and also use a different font in this case. All right, a little bit about forms. It's wrong for 46% of the time as well. Using placeholders as labels for input fields, please don't do that. Because it's, as soon as you type in it, you have no idea what was in there. So please use labels that connect inputs together. And this is also an example of a placeholder attribute using for a date of birth, saying, well, we want this format from you. Okay, well, if I start typing, first of all, it's hard to read, right? It's in light gray because it's not supposed to be out there. But also hard to remember. If I start typing, it's like, was it month, day, month, year? I have no idea. So just do something like this. Or have a better solution, maybe have 3 input fields, 1 for the day, 1 for the month, and 1 for the year. Also, we like creating our custom drop-downs and radios and whatever. Please make sure that it's for, if you're a sighted user, you can probably see, well, this is happy, this is sad, and this is meh, angry in the middle one. But if we create something like this, we have to make sure that screen readers also know what's going on. So what I do here, I have to go there, is that I have that emoji in an area hidden true. So if you might recall, that make sure it's hidden from the screen reader. And I have the happy, angry, and sad in the span with a class of SR only. So that's only used by screen readers and not visible for people who can see it. I have some CSS there to create stuff, make it look pretty. But when we run it,
Happy, selected, radio button, 1 of 3. Angry, selected, radio button, 2 of 3. Sad, selected, radio button, 3 of 3.
so it's clear for sighted users what's going on, but also if you listen to it, it still makes sense, even though you're using emojis here. I also hate error messages like this. Please enter a valid phone number. I don't know what a valid phone number is for you. The US has a different format. In the Netherlands, we have a different format. I don't know what's wrong here. Maybe this helps. This message like, oh, just only enter the digits because we don't like these dashes inside of it. Well, just remove it yourself, I would say, if you're building this. That's not that hard. A little bit about HTML5 form validation. It's in the browsers, but it's crap as hell. It has different implementation, different error messages. When my browser is in English, I still get Dutch errors, for instance, stuff like that. But you can use what's in there, the constraint validation API. If you're interested, have a look at this little GitHub project from me. We are using it in our Vue application. We are using this API to check whether the input is correct or not, but then handle it ourselves with the error messages. And you can do something like this, for instance.
There are 3 errors found in the information you submitted. 1. Name is required. 2. Country can only contain letters. 3. Email format is incorrect.
And if you have errors, please put them next to the or beneath the input fields as well, but also have a summary on top so people can go click on that link and go to the input field that's wrong at that point. So you might have a lot of input fields. I hope not, but it can happen. And we're almost there. Almost lunch. You okay still? All right. Legibility. Well, there are people with minimal education, or maybe they're dyslexic, or have some other kind of disability that makes it hard for them to read stuff. Well, keep in mind, please do not use difficult words or metaphors because people might not understand what you're saying. Also, keep sentences short. That's it, short. Also use positive sentences and active language, not like the doctor will send you an email. No, the doctor sends you an email, for instance. And use a font that's easy to read. You can see in the lower part, I use a serif font, and that's hard for people to read because of all the nice glyphs on it. Designers love it, but please, if you can, fight back. And also don't put it too close together because it's even harder to read, to distinct the separate letters. And also, irony, do not overuse all caps, what I did in my presentation. But I'm allowed, I hope. All right, finally, some little things to make the web even a better place for everybody. Reduce motion. Anybody has motion sickness if they're watching at the screen or something? Because then close your eyes, please, because this is an example of Apple from a few months ago when they introduced the new AirPods. And they did it nice. However, if you have motion sickness or any related disability, it's hard for you to see this. So in your settings, in this case in MacBook, I can set reduce motion in my settings. And if I go back to the website and refresh, then Apple listens to my preference of reducing the motion, just showing an image. And we can do that in different ways ourselves as well. If we have an H1 that has a fancy animation that's bouncing all over the place, yeah, that's nice. But if if I don't want to experience that, we can set the media query in CSS prefers reduce motion to reduce, and maybe give that not that bouncing animation, but a little fading animation, or even nothing. That's fine as well. Another thing is that you can do to reduce motion is whether or not a video needs to start immediately or not. So in this case, if I refresh, it doesn't start because I have reduce motion set to false. Well, reduce motion set to true, so I don't want that motion. If I disable that and I refresh, I can see the video of my little kittens a year ago starting. So it's not only CSS that can listen to that preferred reduced motion, you can also do it with JavaScript. And is it supported? Yes. Don't even look at IE, because IE died a few months ago. When I like dark mode, I like to be able to switch from dark to light. If I'm in the garden, I like light mode. If I'm in my bedroom, I don't know, at 6 in the morning and my girlfriend is still sleeping, I prefer dark mode. Otherwise, I won't be sleeping in that bed that night, probably. So there are different ways to do that. It all comes down to the preferred color scheme that you can see there. It's now, if it's dark, I'm using the background dark and the front as light. And you can see if I switch, it uses my preferences. Also, the browser itself, you can set your preferences, not only system, but also on the browser. So I'm setting it to dark in the browser, and you can see the background is now dark again. So this is how it works. This is a very basic example for switching colors. A more sophisticated way to do it is using a mode that a user can reuse later on. So if I'm now saying it's light and I refresh, it's light, okay, but if I toggle the mode, well, there's nothing here yet, but if I toggle the mode, you can see the theme is now I prefer dark always for this website. And now I prefer light. So you save that information just for the next time. I'm going to skip that. This is in the slides, but this is also in the demo about how you can do this. Can I use it everywhere? Sure, except .ie. The last one, and then you can go to lunch, I swear. Reducing data. It's not, it's almost the last one. If you're on a tight budget on your mobile phone, for instance, you have, I don't know, only, if you're abroad, you're buying a little package for, I don't know, 1 gigabyte for, I don't know how many Norwegian krone. Krone? Yeah. It's nice if a website would take in account that you prefer reduced data. You don't want to use too much data. So, for instance, for this example, if the user has no preference, we are loading that fancy font, that 10 megabyte font to make it nice. If not, then it will be skipped and we'll use Arial. The other way around is, well, set everything with a background of a particular color, and if there's no preference on data reducing, use that nice 20 megabytes background. Is it supported yet? No. But it will. It's one of the things that's coming. In the meantime, what you can do is for Chromium browsers, especially Android devices, you can do it with JavaScript, because they have that enabled. So if save data is true, then you can do stuff with JavaScript. Really, the last one, dev to bullshit. I don't see it that often anymore, but if you build websites like this, yes, I'm really sure I want to have bullshit. Please, either educate yourself. or get another profession or something. Because I'm pretty sure this is not accessible for screen readers at all, but it's also very horrible for people like us that don't need those attributes, but still have to look at this shit. All right, signing off with a quote from a friend of mine. When it comes to accessibility, I rather see imperfect than indifferent. Make little steps, make the world a better place step by step, please. And think of it, maybe in the future you might need to benefit from the things you're building now as well. So I want to say thank you, have a nice lunch, and if you go to rowdy.code/NDC Oslo, you can download the slides and also see some links to some GitHub projects. Thank you very much.